Good evening to all my dear students. So, I am here to have a short discussion on budget and economic survey, the budget which was presented on 23rd of July. Before I start this discussion, I just wanted to tell you about its relevance for UPSC exam and in general relevance for the economy. Because most of the UPSC aspirants are going to watch this, my program. So, first let us discuss that which aspects of budgets are relevant for your exam and whether in prelims or mains, or how you can make use of this budget to get better marks. And we'll discuss all these things, and before that you should also know that in which context this the budget that was presented 2 days back. So, in which context this budget was presented. So, to just let me set the context, you should understand that this NDA government came in 2014, means Modi, you can say government. It came in 2014, so this government has already completed 10 years of tenure, 5 years and 5 years. So, you should know that what exactly government has done in the past 10 years, and in that context you should know, or you should think of what this budget is going to do. Because if you are not very much aware about that what exactly has happened, then just trying to understand this budget in seclusion will not make much sense to you. So, all those students who have a little bit or fair enough idea of what exactly has been done in the last 10 years, they will be able to appreciate this budget and the survey which was presented in a much better way. So, anyways, we cannot discuss the details of the past 10 years, but let me just give you a brief overview so that you can understand that in which overall broader framework this budget exactly fits in. So, in the last 10 years, the present government has mostly done the supply side reforms. We have supply side, we have demand side. So, you must be aware of that we have done a lot of work on infrastructure building, road, railway, airport. We are building logistic park, industrial corridors. Then we brought in GST reforms, then IBC codes. So, all these reforms on the supply side means to improve the production of goods and services. All these things has already been done by the present government, right. So, it has removed the supply side challenges to a certain extent, to a larger extent. Of course, these things are not yet complete, it will keep on going, but majority of the reforms which government thought of on the supply side to remove the bottlenecks in the supply, in the production of goods and services, that has mostly been done. Of course, the implementation work may be going on. So, that has mostly been done. This supply side reform has resolved the bottlenecks, and as you know that post COVID, government aggressively focused on infrastructure building. That infrastructure building helped in bringing the economy out of recession. India was in recession in 2021 due to COVID. So, the aggressive infrastructure spending helped in bringing the economy out of recession. So, basically the 4 factors of production, 4 sectors that you know, government, private, household. So, that has really helped in bringing the economy out of recession, and now post COVID we are growing at a plus 7% rate for the last 3 years, consecutive years. So, more than 7% growth rate for the last 3 years. Now, once government has done all these things post COVID, now government is expecting that private sector should take the lead in keeping this growth momentum forward in the short to medium term, right. Government has done its job, government has pumped into the money into more productive areas of infrastructure. Now, it is the expectation of the government that private sector should take the lead, means now private sector should start investing. So, to a certain extent private investment has started inching up, but it is not up to the mark whatever government was expecting that the private sector will do, that has not yet happened. So, we are still to see the private capital expenditure in the economy. Now, these 3 years which government did, and this expectation is building in that this expenditure by the government will crowd in the private sector. In the meantime, the elections were happened. Now, as you know, the elections most of the people from the government was thinking of that they will get the full majority, single party, but that exactly didn't happen, and now it's a coalition government basically. So, of course, this budget is set in the context of certain political happenings, whatever is there in the economy. So, the political framework is that we have a coalition government, and there is a more of demand coming off that jobs are not good, jobs are fair means good quality of jobs are not being very much created, and that is leading to the frustration among the youth, and maybe that could be the reason of not securing government. This present BJP government, BJP is not securing the full majority. Maybe that could be one of the reasons. So now the present government has focused this budget mostly in the terms of that we should be able to create enough jobs for the youth, because the aspirations of the youth must be met. So that's why if you once we will discuss this budget, you will see that there are a lot of schemes to give more jobs, more training, more skilling for the youth. So in that context, this budget is mostly focusing on the bottom-up model. So last few years we focused on the supply side, infrastructure building. Now we are focusing in this pyramid, we are focusing on the bottom-up model, so that the demand at the bottom level, poor people, young, the demand should come from those sectors, those people, because otherwise until the demand picks up or created by these people through jobs, the private investment is not going to pick up in the economy. So now in this budget, an economic survey also has suggested a lot of reforms, a lot of measures, so that a lot of new jobs for the young aspirants could be created. So in overall this context, this budget and economic survey has been presented. So let us see what are the main. So first, let me just briefly tell you about the main important budget expenses and receipts what government has projected for this year, and then we'll move on to the important features. So as you see that our total expenditure last year was 44.4 lakh crore, and this year it is going to be 48.2 lakh crore. What I am trying to tell you here is that this is approximately an increase of approx 10%. This is an increase of approximately 10% increase. Now out of this total expenditure, you see that revenue expenditure increase is less than 10%, and the capital expenditure, the increase is around 18%. Even though this budget speech of Nirmala Sitharaman didn't talk much about infrastructure. So this budget speech didn't speak much about infrastructure the way the government used to do in the previous budgets. So a lot of people ask me that, isn't government going to spend much on infrastructure? I say no, this is not true. Government is going to spend a lot on infrastructure. Just that speech didn't focus much on that, but we have allocated our capital expenditure is going to increase 18% in this 2024-25 budget, 11.1 lakh crore. This is a massive jump, and you should know that post-COVID, the allocation on capital expenditure has increased 3 times. So this budget also has allocated a lot of capital on infrastructure building, and revenue expenditure has increased less. So overall, you can say that the quality of expenditure of this budget is quite better. How we judge quality of expenditure? Because capital expenditure has increased much more as compared to the revenue expenditure. So we can say that the expenditure quality of the government's finances is going to improve, because capital expenditure, that has a much multiplier effect. So in that context, we say that this expenditure quality is better. Revenue receipts, these things are not much relevant, but you can see that the borrowing debt capital receipts this year is going to decrease from the previous year. This is a significant thing, because generally you see that fiscal deficit, borrowing of fiscal deficit decreases in percentage terms. Generally it doesn't decrease in absolute terms, but this time government, of course in percentage terms also it's going to decrease this year, but even in absolute terms the debt capital receipts means borrowing is going to decrease. This is the basically borrowing is going to decrease. This is very significant, and the fiscal deficit, so the borrowings have decreased, so fiscal deficit is 4.9%. This figure is a very important macro parameter. Why it is very important, let me tell you. You may be thinking of that, sir, if we would not have reduced this much, we could have spent a little bit more on the expenditure of the economy, maybe on capital expenditure or revenue expenditure. But how government thinks of it, try to understand. Government has tried to reduce the fiscal deficit to 4.9%. Earlier, it had targeted that this year, 24-25, it will reduce it to 5.1%. Earlier, it was 5.5% approx, 5.5, 5.6%. So, government had planned earlier that it will keep it to 5.1%, but because government received huge dividend from RBI, so it had the fiscal capacity, fiscal room, so it was able to reduce it to 4.9%. Now, what is the basic reason behind doing this is, government is thinking of doing fiscal consolidation very aggressively. Fiscal consolidation basically means that government is trying to raise revenues, trying to reduce its expenditure, and that expenditure, government is trying to reduce the expenditure, but parallelly keeping on the quality of expenditure. So, government is going to reduce expenditure, government is going to reduce borrowing, this is going to provide macroeconomic stability, and we'll later on discuss that it will help us in improving our credit rating, which can help in bringing a lot of private investment, FDI from abroad. This we'll discuss later on. So, government has focused a lot on much, so we are following this path of fiscal consolidation. The other deficits, either revenue or primary, all have decreased to a considerable level, you can see. So, in that context, we are on the path of fiscal consolidation. Now, as you know that all these budget figures are basically based on nominal terms. All the budgeted figures are in nominal terms because budget is for present year. So, if you have to explain the expenditure or anything in percentage terms, you need to explain it in the terms of present year. So, last year GDP was rupees 295 lakh crore, that was nominal GDP. This year GDP is this. This year, this is the nominal GDP, 326 lakh crore, expected nominal GDP 326 lakh crore. So, nominal GDP is going to increase by, so we are expecting that nominal GDP will increase by 10.5%. Now, just let me tell you one thing. In 23-24, nominal GDP has increased by around 9.6%. From 20 to 23, nominal GDP has increased by 9.6%. Why 9.6%? You may say that, sir, the real growth is 7-8% and inflation is 4-5%. So, how can this nominal growth be 9.6%? So, basically, nominal growth, real growth, there is an important term called GDP deflator. Inflation CPI index is growing by around 4.5 to 5%. WPI is 0%, 0.5%. This month it was around 1.5%, but WPI is between 0 to 1%, CPI is between 4 to 5%. GDP deflator, which of course measures the price change, it uses CPI and WPI both. So, if you will talk about GDP deflator, it is less than 2%. So, while we are calculating nominal GDP and real GDP, for certain items we calculate in real terms, for certain items we calculate in nominal terms, and then we deflate. So, we are using GDP deflator to get from real to nominal or nominal to real, rather than separately CPI or WPI. And GDP deflator we calculate from CPI and WPI combined. So, GDP deflator is less than 2%. That is why the difference between real growth and nominal growth is hardly 1.5 to 2%. So, this year also that trend is going to continue. So, that is why we are expecting 10.5%. This is nominal growth expected this year. The real growth expected is 7%. So, still the GDP deflator is 3.5%. CPI inflation may be 4.5 to 5%, and WPI is going to be around 2%. So, GDP deflator 2 to 3%. So, it will come around 10.5%. Fine. So, GDP deflator takes into account the retail and wholesale both prices, a mix of both, you can say. Gross tax revenue at the central level is 38.4 lakh crore this year expected, and our GDP 326 lakh crore. So the tax to GDP ratio is going to be around 11.8%. This is for center. If you talk about states, it is going to be around 5.5 to 6%. So overall India's center and state combined tax to GDP ratio is going to be around 17%. This is a good figure. In the last 5-6 years back, it used to be around, this figure used to be around 15 to 16%, so it has increased. Don't say that it has increased just by 1%. A lot of considerable improvements are required to do this thing. So we are improving on the tax to GDP front also. So this was a brief overview about the expenditure and macro parameters and stability. So let's move on to the main areas where this budget is focusing on. So as you know that our Prime Minister always say that there are only 4 castes in India, and those 4 castes are basically poor, women, youth and farmers. So again the same thing has been iterated in this budget. The main themes, the 4 themes of this budget, as I told you that the last few years we have focused mostly on the supply side, mostly on infrastructure and removing the supply side bottlenecks. This budget is going to focus on the bottom-up approach to create more and more in demand, so that this demand could be supplied by the private sector, and then the short-term and medium-term growth should be driven by the capital expenditure of the private sector. So you see this employment, skilling, middle class, to a certain extent MSMEs, this is going to create a demand. MSMEs, a lot of MSMEs are informal, one-man driven economy. So if they will get money, they are going to create a demand in the economy, which may help in crowding in the private sector. So these are the 4 major themes of this budget. These are the themes. To make this country Viksit Bharat, as you know that we are in the Amrit Kal from 2022 to 2047, this 25 years period leading to the 100 years of independence is basically called Amrit Kal. So as you know that our Prime Minister has targeted that by the end of this Amrit Kal, we should be able to become a developed nation. Our per capita income should be more than around $14,000 in nominal terms. So we should be able to become a developed country by the end of 2047. And for that, this budget lays down 7 priority areas. Now see, if all those students who have already attended my classes or doing my classes, if you will talk about this budget and economic survey, this covers your entire syllabus plus a lot of other things also. So a lot of things have been proposed in the budget, a lot of things have been said in the economic survey. Each and everything cannot be discussed in detail here. So what I am going to focus on here is, there are certain technical issues, analytical issues. So those issues I will try to discuss in a more thorough manner, and those which are just information based things, that I will briefly cover, right? Because these things, the 9 priorities for India to become a Viksit Bharat, these things have been in the economy since so many years, and this will remain. It's just that government's focus will be more. So you may think of that if government's focus is more on these areas, so you may expect mains questions in these areas, or if a scheme is launched in that particular sector, then of course that could be asked in prelims also. But here in the budget, the details of all these schemes are not very clear till now. So once these schemes are launched, then what are the details that will be more important as compared to this time. So here we are going to briefly tell you about that what are the broad areas of the budget. So one is definitely agriculture. If you see here, we have written productivity and resilience in agriculture. One of the most important issue in India is that Indian agriculture, we have more cultivable land than China, but our output or productivity you say is 2 to 2.5 times less than China. So we have more cultivable land, but our output is less. Why? Because of the challenges in productivity. Our productivity is less. So, one of the major challenges that our agriculture faces is productivity. We have more people in the agriculture sector, but our output is less. So, we have more cultivable land, but our output is less. So, we have more cultivable land, but our productivity is less. So, one of the major challenges that our agriculture faces is productivity. We have more people in the agriculture sector, but our output is less. So, we have more cultivable land, we have more people in the agriculture sector, agriculture sector employs maximum people. Out of the 56 crore labor force, around 43% is into the agriculture. So you can say that around 23 crore people are in agriculture, but still the output is less. That means the productivity of the labor is less. So the first priority is agriculture, is productivity and resilience. Resilience because climatic changes are going to impact agriculture a lot and the farmers' income. So there is a focus on resilience also. So we need to improve productivity and resilience in agriculture. This is one of the very important and the first priority of the Viksit Bharat. So government is going to focus on agricultural research for bringing new resilient varieties for agriculture. Then Atmanirbharta, as you know that oil seeds, India is more dependent, we import more than 50% of the oil needs. So we are going to focus on Atmanirbharta in oil seeds. That means we will try to produce these things, try to increase the production domestically. We will try to become self-reliant in oil seeds. Then release of new varieties. As you know that to increase productivity, one of the main areas that we can do is bring in new and better variety of seeds, better yielding variety of seeds. So 109 new high yielding and climate resilient varieties of 32 field and horticulture crops will be brought in. Vegetable production and supply chain. Now just let me tell you that why this vegetable production and supply chain, why there is a lot of focus here. See the context. Why there is why the first priority is agriculture and why all these things are there. Right now you know that our inflation is around 5%. And RBI is saying that we should bring it down to 4%. This inflation is CPI combined, which RBI targets. But if you will see, this 5% CPI combined, in this CPI combined of 5%, core inflation is 3%. It is because of the higher food inflation of around 9% that our headline inflation has moved to 5%. So the major reason that RBI is not able to bring it down to 4% is food items. And RBI's repo rate tool is not going to, will not be able to handle food inflation. The main policy themes should be of the government. So until unless, and in food inflation, the major volatility areas that are basically horticulture, livestock, horticulture, not the cereals basically. Yes, cereals, there is inflation, but majority of the food inflation is coming from fruits, vegetables, horticulture, livestock. That's why this vegetable production and supply chain, because these are perishable areas, a lot of supply gets impacted because of the post-harvest losses. We don't have that processing capabilities, storage capabilities. So that's why it lays a very strong focus on increasing the production of, increasing the supply of vegetables through FPOs, cooperatives and startups, right? Then what are the other areas in agriculture? We are going to focus on natural farming. As you know that intensive agriculture inputs that we have used, it has resulted in stagnation of fields. So we are going to focus more on natural farming. So you should also know that, see, earlier when this government came, this GM crops, then the focus moved to organic crops. Now the focus is on natural farming. So in the last 10 years, from GM crops to organic crops to natural farming. So you should also understand that there is a lot of focus on natural farming. So in that context, UPSC also frames questions. So you should focus more on natural farming. Shrimp production and export, there is a lot of scope and potential to increase farmers' income through shrimp production. So that's why government is going to bring a financing mechanism through NABARD for export and production of shrimps. Then digital public infrastructure, as you know that digital public infrastructure has helped in saturating various services, various welfare measures to the government. For example, banking, Jan Dhan, insurance, health, Ayushman Bharat. All these things we have been able to reach to the poor through digital public infrastructure and of course that payment transactions. Now that thing we are trying to bring in agriculture also. So how come we are going to bring in digital public infrastructure? DPI for coverage of farmers and their lands. A lot of farmers don't have their proper land records or not in digital form, during sale and keeping collateral, it creates a problem. So government is going to bring in digital public infrastructure, so it will have a proper storage of all these land records. Then digital crop surveys in 400 districts, and national cooperation policy. We have been able to improve the milk production through cooperatives. So government is going to focus also on cooperative model to increase the production and supply chain of fruits and vegetables and few other crops. So this was the first priority area. Next, it is employment and skilling. This, if you'll ask this budget, one of the most important focus area is employment and skilling, because this is going to fulfill the aspirations of the youth and create the demand in the economy. The last 4 years, our growth was driven by government's expenditure. The future growth must be driven by the consistent household sector demand and private sector investment. That's why there is a major focus on employment and skilling, because earlier budgets, whatever we have been able to spend on infrastructure through budgetary resources, now those resources will be limited because we are moving on the path of fiscal consolidation. So the next set of demand and growth should come from private sector in terms of investment and household sector in terms of consumption. Now, as you know that post-COVID government had launched production-linked incentive schemes. Production-linked incentive scheme was a supply-side reform where companies were offered cash incentives if they are going to put additional machinery, and through that additional machinery or investment, they are going to increase production. So there was cash incentives on additional sales, 4 to 6% of additional sales government was going as cash incentive. That scheme has been quite successful in electronics, mobile, and various other white goods. It has been quite successful on the production side. So economic survey and various other Federation of Industry have suggested that we must bring in similar kind of a scheme to create more employment. So that's why in this budget we have launched employment linked incentive schemes. So earlier it was production linked incentive, now so earlier it was PLI. Now it is ELI, employment linked incentive. That means if companies are going to generate new employment, then they are going to get incentives. New employment, see, now you may ask that, sir, if they increase production, earlier if they increase production, then of course employment must have been created. Not exactly true. What is happening in India is that if I have to increase production, of course labor is required, but I may mechanize my production capacity. I may mechanize my production capacity through Industry 4.0, robotics in such a way that the requirement of labor may be very less. So a lot of investment that is happening in India, because you know that still we have not been able to implement the new labor codes. A lot of companies in India, they try to substitute the labor with machines. If a company wants to increase production, what they have done? So rather than hiring more labor, they have tried that can we replace this labor with any machines? Can a particular machine can do this job? So they have tried focusing more on bringing in more capital rather than hiring labor. Now government is saying that if you will hire more laborers, we are going to give incentive. The earlier scheme was production linked incentive scheme. Government said that if you will put more investment, and because of that if there are additional sales, government will give incentive. But here government is saying that we are not concerned about the capital, putting capital. If you are going to hire more people, then we are going to give incentives. Now what are the incentives? So there are 3 schemes and incentives are linked in all these 3 schemes. Let's see how. So the first scheme is, it has been named Scheme A, First Timers. 1 month wage to new entrants in all formal sectors in 3 installments up to rupees 15,000. So if private sector hires any person, government will incentivize this by giving 15,000 rupees in 3 different installments. And so this government is going to give for 2.1 crore youths. Now a lot of companies, a lot of MSMEs may hire more labor, because then their labor cost is going to come down through this scheme. So formal sector. Scheme B, So this was the first timer, those people who were hired for the first time. Job creation in manufacturing. Linked to first time, this is again for first time employees. Incentive to both employee and employer for EPFO contributions. As you know that employee and employer both contributes 12%. So here government is going to give contribution for employees. So whatever employees contribute and whatever employers contribute, government is going to support both. So incentive to both employee and employer for EPFO, Employees Provident Fund Organization contributions in the specified scales for the first 4 years. So for the first 4 years, government will giving. So specified scales means the government will give in the details at what level, for how many rupees of salary government will be giving. But again, it is also for the formal sector because EPFO is involved, so government will be contributing for the contribution of both employee and employer, expected to benefit around 30 lakh youth. Next, schemes is support to employers. So government will reimburse EPFO contributions. So first, the employers, the companies will have to contribute, and then later on government will reimburse up to rupees 3,000 per month for 2 years for all new hires. This is going to benefit 50 lakh. So this 50 lakh, 30 lakh, 80 lakh, approx 2.93 crore youths are going to benefit from this, and this will definitely, the way we have seen in the past, this will definitely help in generating more employments and meeting the aspirations of the poor and increasing the demand in the economy, which will ultimately support growth. See, the production linked incentive scheme directly attacked on the production side. This is going to create demand, and then it will further increase the production in the economy. Skilling program, as you know that in India, around 4.5% only youth are formally skilled. So there is a huge gap in skills. So the people who are educated, hardly 50% are employable. So government is going to meet that skilling gap through 20 lakh youth will be skilled over a 5-year period. 1,000 industrial training institutes will be upgraded, hub and spoke model, and course and content design will be aligned as per the skill need of the industry. So government will interact with the industry, and courses will be modified, changed so that they suit what are the industry's requirements. So these, trust me, these 3 schemes, first timers, job creation, manufacturing, and support employers, if this is going to be implemented properly along with this skilling program, this is going to have a huge impact on job creation and ultimately demand and growth. But of course, it will also depend on how exactly it was implemented, plus supported with various other policy measures. If this scheme will be helpful if we are able to reform the labor, already reforms have been done, if we have been able to implement the labor laws. Then employment and skilling, we have participation of women in the workforce. As you know that the present government has made a huge focus on women also, that the condition of the women should improve and they should become more, they should come more into the jobs. So facilitating higher participation of women in the workforce through setting up of working women hostels in collaboration with the industry and establishing creches. So in India, we have male labor force participation around 70% plus, but female we have labor force participation only 37%, and this too has improved in the last 5-6 years. Earlier it was only 23.3. This is going to be a major driver of economic growth in the future. If think of that, if this is going to be increased, doubled to 70%, then how much demand it is going to generate in the economy. So of course, there was already a question asked in the UPSC regarding care economy. So this is going to boost a lot this care economy, right? And as you know that till now when women were at home and they were taking care of the old or young people, it was not getting added in the GDP. Now all this is going to be formally added in GDP also. Next priority, inclusive human resource development and social justice. So under this clause, under this priority, government has focused more on giving packages to various states. For example, it has given a package for Bihar, for a major development of a node in Gaya. So the industrial corridor that is already being built on the dedicated freight corridor from this Amritsar to Kolkata, government is going to create an industrial node at Gaya, means basically integrated manufacturing clusters will be developed at Gaya. More than 100 branches of India Post Payment Bank is going to be opened in the northeast region, and plans for endowment rich states in the eastern parts covering this for generation of more economic opportunities, so better human development and social justice. Then next, yes, the node that Gaya is going to be, so here government is going to establish a integrated manufacturing cluster. So this is basically industrial corridor from here Ludhiana to Kolkata. We already have this dedicated freight corridor. So on this we are going to develop an industrial node at Gaya. Then government is going to support Andhra Pradesh also. As per this act, government will be giving financial support for various irrigation projects and various other infrastructure projects. Moving to the next priority, manufacturing and services. So as I told you that in this budget, one very important thing is employment and skilling, and the second one of the most important focus is manufacturing and services. And manufacturing also, there is going to be a lot of focus on manufacturing, increase of manufacturing through MSME. So we will see MSMEs are into both services and manufacturing. So there is a lot of focus on manufacturing also, there is a lot of focus on MSMEs also. Because the production linked incentive scheme that government brought in, it was mostly captured by big companies. They have been able to increase production and take the incentives. So now we are going to give a lot of focus on MSMEs and incentives also. For facilitating, so what we are going to do for manufacturing and services, for facilitating terms loan to MSMEs for purchase of machinery and equipment without collateral. So if MSMEs want loan for purchase of machinery without collateral, loan will be provided. This is a very important thing. Public sector banks will build their in-house capability to assess MSMEs for credit. Earlier, public sector banks used to get to assess their credit, they used to be dependent on external sources, CICs, and that creates, to a certain extent, that creates a doubt. And if banks are going to build in-house capability to assess the credit profile, then definitely it is going to benefit lending activity to MSMEs. It will help in easier lending, better lending, faster lending by public sector banks to MSMEs. So government is going to build in-house capability for credit assessment. Credit support to MSMEs during stress period through a guarantee from a government. See, this kind of thing was also launched earlier post-COVID, credit link guarantee scheme for MSMEs, those who had taken credit and were not able to pay. So post-COVID, government gave them that if you want to borrow further loans, government will be giving credit guarantee through a particular entity. So again, that kind of a scheme is going to be launched. Then the limit of mudra loans, a very important thing. Earlier mudra loans were till 10 lakhs. Now the limit has going to be increased. But government has put a very important thing here, that only those people who have already borrowed and paid, only they will be able to access this 20 lakh amount. To entrepreneurs who have availed and successfully repaid previous loans under the Tarun category. So we have Shishu, Kishore, Tarun. Tarun was from 5 lakh to 10 lakh. Now it has been increased to 20 lakhs, but only for those who have already borrowed and paid successfully. So SIDBI will open new branches. SIDBI, Small Industry and Development Bank of India, which focuses more on the credit of the MSMEs, is going to expand its reach to serve all major MSME clusters within 3 years and provide direct credit to them. If you will ask, one of the most important challenges that MSMEs face today is how to get formal credit. A lot of MSMEs are still dependent on informal credit, which is available at a quite higher rate. So government, because you try to understand, till now a lot of big companies have held various schemes. Now we are going to focus on the bottom of the pyramid. So on the bottom of the pyramid, there are individuals also, and there are a lot of very small MSMEs also. They need to be provided support. Then only this bottom-up approach model is going to be successful. So in that context, government is going to focus a lot on MSMEs. So SIDBI is going to open branches in MSME clusters and provide direct credit to them. Why this word direct? Because SIDBI generally provides indirect funding. SIDBI gives loan to banks, NBFCs, DFI, banks, NBFCs, and then they further give loan to MSMEs. So SIDBI here will be focusing on direct credit to MSMEs also. Financial support for setting up 50 multi-product food irradiation units, processing units. A lot of processing units are mostly processing units belong to MSME companies, small companies. So government, you will see later that in this budget there is a lot of focus on food processing enterprises also. Why there is a focus, we will discuss in detail later on. To enable MSMEs and traditional artisans to sell their products, so we are going to create an e-commerce export hubs so that the MSMEs are able to export more. Then again, manufacturing services, government will launch a comprehensive scheme. This is a very important scheme, I feel, because a lot of students after the college, they are not able, what industry claims that whatever students have read, it is not of much use and they are not employable. At college level, we don't get enough experience, so students are also not very much aware that what industry demands. So this kind of thing, government will launch a comprehensive scheme for providing internship opportunities in 500 top companies to 1 crore youth in 5 years. I think this will bridge that huge gap which till now existed between academics and industry. So this complaint of industries that the youth is not employable, this is definitely going to fill that gap and it is going to create jobs also. So they will gain exposure for 12 months in real life business environment, varied professions and employment opportunities. And how government is going to support it? An internship allowance of rupees 5,000 per month for 1 year and one-time assistance for rupees 6,000 crore. Just let me see any of your doubts. What if you want to say anything? Voice is breaking. Is there any voice issue? Okay. Someone is asking about GDP deflator, I will tell you. Next, manufacturing and services. So government is going to focus more on industrial parks, critical mission. I think these things you can just read on and the details will be clear later on. Then urban development, transit-oriented development, if you want to know. So government is going to focus more on transit-oriented development. As you know that our cities are getting crowded with more and more cars and two-wheelers. Transit-oriented development is going to create a solution for it. How? If you see this figure, so transit-oriented development means there will be nodes in the city. That nodes will be connecting different modes of transport, but it will be more focusing on rail transit system. So there will be walkways and last mile connectivity, first mile connectivity, so that everyone can come on to that node, and from that node, more trains or bus system will be connected. So the number of cars will be reduced in this transit-oriented development, and people will have a better quality of life. So to improve the urban development, government is going to plan for transit-oriented development, and government is also going to focus on weekly hearts. Government is going to create 100 weekly hearts or street food hubs in select cities, because there is a lot of crowding on the roads that are happening. So that has also become a major problem. Now, energy security, as we know that climate change is really becoming a big challenge around the world, and it's a major challenge for India, because still agriculture is a very important part of the economy. It is employing the maximum labor force, and climate change is impacting agriculture negatively. So we are going to have a proper energy security through energy transition, and there is a lot of focus on nuclear energy, where we are going to set up small nuclear plants, small reactors. Then infrastructure. Infrastructure, I have already said, in this budget we have 11.11 lakh crore of expenditure, which is going to be 3.4% of GDP. Earlier it was, in the last 3 years we have doubled it. In the last 3 years we have tripled it basically. post-COVID. Long-term interest-free loan, this is a scheme which is already running, Central Assistance for States Capital Expenditure, where central government provides long-term loan to state governments, interest-free loan only if they are going to spend on capital expenditure. So the amount is rupees 1.5 lakh crore. Then investment in infrastructure by private sector will be promoted through viability gap funding. In case of PPP model, a lot of projects which are not viable, government selects private party and government says that if the project is not viable, we are going to give that much of funding to you so that that project becomes viable, and then private sector is attracted. So government is also going to focus on that. There is a lot of focus on rural connectivity through Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana also. So fourth phase will be launched. Those villages which will be eligible, there are certain population above which the villages becomes eligible. Then irrigation and flood mitigation projects, because Bihar, Assam, these states, Bihar, Assam, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand are getting impacted by the floods. So government will be establishing infrastructure there also. Then innovation, research and development. So there is a huge focus on space economy. A venture capital fund for rupees 1,000 crore is to be set up. And private sector driven research and innovation with a pool of 1 lakh crore financing is going to be developed. Then next generation reforms. So next generation reforms, government has just given a broad guideline how it will be done, that we will see. But next generation reforms, as I told you in the context that we have already reformed GST, IBC, infrastructure, NMP, Gati Shakti. Now, one of the main important concerns is that our overall factor productivity is quite less. The total factor productivity in the economy is quite less. You talk about labor, you talk about natural resource, you talk about capital, or you talk about the owners, entrepreneurs. The overall productivity is less. So here, economic policy framework, government is going to incentivize reforms for improving productivity of factors of production. Facilitating markets and sectors to become more efficient. So when I say, see, try to understand how this is all linked. Improving productivity of factors of production. Now our labor force, hardly, as I said, 4.5, 4.6% is skilled. So our whole labor is very less productive. So through skilling, through training, through internship that we have seen in the schemes, we are going to increase the productivity of labor. A lot of minerals are there, but we have not been able to extract or exploit it. We are giving mining auctions, even if we have given mineral auctions of critical minerals also. Then improving the productivity of capital, bringing in new technology. Improving governance even also helps in increasing the productivity of capital. So we are going to focus major on 4 factors of production so that the overall factor productivity, means total factor productivity, improves up. Now what exact steps government is going to do, that government will tell further on, then we will see. Then land related reforms and actions both in rural and urban areas, land administration, planning and management. Now one of the main important areas of this land administration is, if you will see in a lot of states, if you purchase land, immediately the ownership in the land record, which is called mutation, is not transferred. This creates a lot of legal issues. The same land is being sold to someone else. Generally, mutation takes 5 months, 6 months, a year. Now, certain government has nudged states and certain state governments has started this being done on a real-time basis. Once this, suppose I sold land to someone, once this transfer of ownership, because this is done through sale deeds, once this transfer of ownership, so this transfer of ownership doesn't happen in the government records immediately, it takes time. So a lot of states are now working on real-time transfer of ownership of land in government records, which is called mutation. That is going to help land administration. And of course, GIS mapping and linking all this with the digital public infrastructure, online system, it is going to help in agricultural financing, it is going to help in keeping land as a collateral, because digital, if you have digital record, you can easily keep this record with bank as collateral in smart, through smart contracts. Urban planning, as I told you that government is focusing more on transit-oriented development. Labor-related reforms, mostly focusing on skilling and job requirements, what industry demands and what labor has. Then FDI and overseas investment. FDI, what comes to India, direct investment is what Indian companies invest abroad. Now this reform maybe government had thought of because in the last 3 years, the FDI in India has reduced. Maybe because of geopolitical tensions, maybe because of economic nationalism, you say. Every country is trying to do more and more production in terms of for job creation in their own boundaries. So this is impacting FDI. Now government has said that the rules and regulations for FDI and ODI will be simplified to facilitate foreign direct investment and promote opportunities for using Indian rupee as a currency for overseas investment. Right now when companies are investing abroad, suppose a particular company has to open a subsidiary abroad, they convert rupee into dollar and then through dollar they invest. Now we are trying to promote that more and more rupee transactions are accepted abroad while we are doing overseas investment. Actually, we are working on the path of making rupee an international currency, reserve currency. So every step in trade or in overseas direct investment, we are trying that more and more countries should start accepting rupee. And you may be seeing that a lot of facilitation at the transaction level. At the transaction level through UPI, we are facilitating that other countries when they are coming to other people when they are coming here, or when we are going abroad, we should be able to use UPI for transactions. So it is all in terms of making rupee more acceptable outside. And as we know that such a huge country, such a huge labor force, until as we attract more and more foreign investment, it's quite difficult for government to create jobs. So that's why there is a lot of focus on FDI. So right now our FDI is around, it has decreased $30 to $35 billion. We are targeting that for the next 10-15 years, we should be able to attract $100 billion of FDI annually. So until unless we implement reforms, simplify rules and regulations, because certain reforms we have already done, majority of the sectors we have put into automatic approval route, but still certain sectors are there. In a lot of sectors we don't, as I said, 98% of the sectors are under automatic route. But beyond a certain investment, if there is a, let's say, amount, let's say rupees 5,000 crores, above that, every FDI requires approval. Beyond a certain amount, every FDI requires approval. So there are a lot of approvals requirement or compliances. So we need to reform it to bring more FDI. NPS, as you know that a lot of states are demanding, that the old pension scheme should be reestablished. Government has said that we will not go back to the old system, but of course we are open to making certain changes in NPS. So government has appointed a review committee. If they give suggestions, NPS maybe certain modifications may be done. NPS Vatsal, the government is going to start this year. NPS Vatsal means I will open an account, in my own account, I will start contributing for my children, and once they are adult, they will have a separate account of their own with that money only. So this was about the 9 priority areas for making India a Viksit Bharat. This was 9 priority areas. Then coming to the tax part, as I told you that, see, the significance of budget has reduced in a sense that most of the indirect taxes has been separated and now it is being handled through GST. So now budget doesn't propose any taxes which are under GST. So GST council meeting happens and they propose. So all that SGST, CGST, which was earlier in excise or VAT, all has gone into GST mechanism. So the whole lot of changes that earlier used to be done through budget is now being done through GST. So indirect taxes, hardly few. Customs duty are left outside GST. So there are certain major changes in customs duty. no need to remember, but one thing I just wanted to point out is that reduce basic customs duty 15% on mobile phones. So earlier it was 20%, it has been reduced to 15%. Why it is important is that India is becoming a major hub of mobile manufacturing. Our mobile imports early, see, we are huge, our biggest import is oil. Niti Aayog has said that if we will not try to manufacture mobiles in India and electronics in India, after a few years, this electronics import, which was huge till now, is going to exceed the import of petroleum products. So there is a lot of focus of government on electronics manufacturing and mobile manufacturing. And in that electronics manufacturing, certain subcomponents are required, which we import. Since those components were costly because of higher customs duty, so our products were getting costlier and we were not able to export. So to open the export, to make the electronics more export competitive, we have started reducing customs duty on mobile components, PCB and this. And we have reduced customs duty on mobile phones also, so that we should allow competition to Indian companies so that they become more competitive and then only they can export abroad. So remember this point, it's very important, because electronics industry is going to be a huge industry in future for India in terms of manufacturing. Exempted more capital goods for manufacturing of solar cells and panels. This is for, as you know, energy transition, energy security. Just one sec. Then coming to direct taxes. A lot of students were asking me, sir, please explain in detail what are the changes in capital gains and direct tax. So there has been a major change. So let us understand what are the changes in the direct taxes. Short-term capital gain tax on equities and other financial assets have been increased from 15% to 20%. See, capital gain, when you purchase something, let's say you purchase something at 1 crore and sold at 1.5 crore. I purchased a real estate in 1 crore and sold it in 1.5 crore. So there is a gain of 50 lakh. On this gain, government imposes tax. So this is called capital gain tax. Now capital gain tax is applicable on certain instruments, for example, real estate, land, real estate, shares, bond, gold, etc. So on all these, capital gains is imposed. One is called short term and the other is called long term. So suppose I purchased a house and sold in the same year, then it is called then short term capital gain tax will be applicable. If I purchased a house and sold it after 3 years, then it will come under long term. So government wants that you should transact, you should purchase shares or bonds for long term, not for short term trading purpose. So generally you will see, generally or always, that long term capital gain tax rate is less and short term capital gain tax is high. So government wants to promote more long term investment and want to restrict short term investment. So short term tax rates are more. Earlier on equities, shares, the short term tax was 15% and now it has been increased to 20%. Long term gains, so earlier if I was purchasing a share, something 100 rupees and selling after 1 year, it was considered long term. So 1 year is the time period for classification of short term and long term in equity financing. Earlier it was 10%. Earlier, this long term gains, earlier it was 10%. So it has been reduced from 10%. It has been increased to 12.5%. Now why it has been done, you need to understand. This is a normal change from 15% to 20%. Normal change means the change is there 5%, but not much of policy implication, but this is going to be a major change. Why? Let me just explain you. Earlier, when I was, listen carefully, earlier when I was purchasing real estate. So if I purchased a real estate worth rupees 1 crore and let's say after 2 years or 3 years, I sold it in 1.5 crore. So my gain is 50 lakh. My gain is 50 lakh. Now, government was not imposing tax on the entire amount of 50 lakh. No. Government was reducing the impact of inflation, which is called indexation benefits. So earlier, if I purchased a house today, 1 crore, sold it after 3 years in 1.5 crore, the gain is 50 lakh. Now in these 3 years, if the inflation, combined 3 years inflation is 15%. So on 50 lakh, I don't need to pay long-term capital gain tax. First 15% will be removed. 15% of the amount will be removed. So 50 lakh is the gain, inflation is 15%, so 15, 3, 45, 4.5 lakh will be removed. And I need to pay tax only on 44.5 lakh. So indexation benefit was allowed. So if the inflation is very high and because of that you are getting more capital gain, then the tax will be imposed only on certain amount which is left after inflation, right? So earlier on long-term real estate, the capital gain was 20%. The capital gain was 20%, but indexation benefit was allowed. So effectively, if you remove that indexation part, effectively you are paying tax only 13-14%, only 12-13% basically on long-term capital, on long-term real estate capital gain. So earlier long-term capital gain on real estate was 20% with indexation benefits. Earlier long-term capital gain on equities was 10%. Government wanted to simplify and make the same tax rate for all these instruments. So government has increased the capital gain on long-term capital gain on equities from 10% to 12.5%. And as you know that with indexation, the long-term tax, capital gain tax on real estate was 20%. So now government has said that you will not get indexation benefit in long-term capital gain in real estate. And if you remove the indexation benefit, the long-term capital gain tax on real estate has brought down from 20% to 12.5%. So now long-term capital gain tax on equities and real estate is same. But as such, there is not much impact on real estate, because earlier when the long-term capital gain tax was 20%, indexation benefit was allowed. Now that indexation benefit has been removed, that's why the rate has. So government wanted to simplify the rules so that the same tax rate is applicable on different kinds of instruments for long-term capital gains. So that's why government has brought it down to 12 or increased to 12.5%. So equities, it has increased, and real estate, it has decreased, but not much effective change because indexation benefit has been removed. Now equalization levy, a lot of tech companies which were doing business in India, making revenue in India without having a physical presence, government was imposing equalization levy. I cannot explain in detail equalization levy here, it's a big topic. So a lot of companies were earlier doing business in India without having a physical presence. So on those companies, income tax was not applicable. So government was levying 2% equalization levy. Now government is saying, because US, there was a pressure from US, so government is saying we will remove equalization levy. So equalization levy has not been abolished, but it is going to be removed on certain kinds of businesses. So withdrawal of 2% equalization levy on a wide variety of services rendered by offshore tech firms, including cloud services and e-commerce. Not on, maybe we will have to see that on what are items, no need to know as such. To bolster the Indian startup ecosystem, boost the entrepreneurial spirit, government proposes to abolish angel tax. There was a lot of confusion regarding how to exactly calculate angel tax. A lot of startups and unlisted companies have asked government to remove this angel tax. So what is angel tax? It is applicable on all those companies which were not listed. So if a company is not listed, the exact valuation is never clear. What is the value? If a company is listed, share is getting traded, so you know what is the actual valuation of the company as per the share price. But if a company is not listed, you don't know the exact actual valuation. So in case of unlisted companies, a lot of investors used to invest at a much higher price to fund the company. So it was a way of to fund the company. Let's say the company's valuation is 1 lakh crore. Now I contributed to the company at a fairly higher price to park my funds and support that startup. So government was saying that that extra money that you are paying to the company, that is an income for the company, and government used to put angel tax on that. But what is the exact valuation? There is no way to calculate. So there was a lot of confusion. So government has abolished angel tax from this year, 1st April. Then next, yes, the income tax under the new slab has been changed. Earlier it was 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9. Now the new change is this. And as per the new change, people are going to benefit around 17,500 rupees annually. So now is between 0 to 3, nil, 3 to 7, 5%. So this new regime is now better as compared to the old regime, because here the tax rate is going to be less and it is basically more progressive also. So this is just no need to remember as such. I don't think that UPSC is going to ask this thing in exam. Now, economic survey. Economic survey, a huge document. Almost everything that is going in the economy, it is covered in economic survey. So here in this class, I cannot cover this entire economic survey, but certain important themes or important areas on which economic survey has focused, let us discuss that. And you will see that a lot of things which has been proposed in the budget was basically the suggestion of economic survey. So whatever economic survey has felt and realized and it has tested, based on that also budget proposals are there. So you have seen budget schemes. Now let us understand the important themes of economic survey. See, first it discusses about the global economy. The global growth in 2023, calendar year wise we calculate. So it was 3.2%, which has moderated because of rising geopolitical tensions, Middle East and Russia and Ukraine. FDI has reduced. Why FDI has reduced, we will discuss it later on. But despite all these global challenges, Indian economy has been very much resilient. It grew 2021, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24. It grew in 9.2%, then 7.2%, then 8.2%. So on average, it has grown at a fairly good growth, more than 7% for 3 years. But why it has been possible? Because of the reforms, the supply side reforms that we have done in the last 10 years. So this growth has been driven by consumption demand and steadily improving investment demand. So earlier it was driven by government spending, but now the consumption demand has started picking up, and investment, private investment, and of course government investment has also supported in the past, but now from here onwards it is going to be taken by the private investment. One thing, why I have written this slide, I just wanted to show you one thing. In 23-24, our economic growth was 8.2%, which is basically the growth at constant market price. So the growth was 8.2% in 23-24. But the GVA growth was only 7.2%. So there is a difference of 1%. Why? Because market price is equal to basic price GVA basic price plus indirect taxes minus subsidy. In the last few years, as you know, that our tax collection has improved a lot and we have rationalized the subsidies. So subsidies we have reduced, taxes we have been able to increase, indirect taxes. So this has increased a lot. This tax minus subsidy has grown at 20%, around 19 point some percentage. You see, 19.1%. So this thing has grown a lot. So even if our GVA growth through value added method, our GVA growth was only 7.2%. But this indirect taxes minus subsidy has grown a lot, 19%. So that's why our overall growth is coming to be 8.2%. So there was a major divergence between GVA and GDP growth. But it's fine because, so you cannot say that this is bad, but you must understand that the 4 factors of production, their value grew at only 7.2%, and there was more tax collection, because of which our growth is looking high, 8.2%. This growth, higher growth of tax, may not be there in the future. So our growth, whole overall growth may look less, because in the last few years we have done enough reforms to improve the tax buoyancy. That's the reason our growth, tax collection has increased. The share of agriculture, 17.7%, industry 27.6%. I will share this PPT so that certain additional information that you want to note, you can get it. This is the growth of agriculture, industry and services. You can just have a look. One very interesting thing is that you see industry, 9.5% in 24. Our industrial sector has never grown at this rate ever. Our industrial sector has never grown at 9.5%. And you see services growth is 7.6%. You know that our services sector is generally higher than the manufacturing or industrial sector. Why this has happened? Because of the huge focus on infrastructure. Our manufacturing growth is increasing. This is a major structural shift that I am seeing in the economy. Capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation. So mostly, as I am saying that, see, capital formation happens by the government sector also, by the private sector also. Post-COVID, it was mostly government sector capital formation that has driven the growth. Now we are trying that it should crowd in the private capital formation also. At the world level, there is huge uncertainty. There is dip in the growth, except US has recovered quite well. But at the global level, there is macroeconomic instability. A lot of countries are still struggling, but Indian economy has been very resilient, I have already told you, and we have been able to move on the path of fiscal consolidation. And this has happened because we have been able to rationalize our subsidies, we have been able to reduce our interest expenditure, and we have been able to increase our taxes. So government has followed a path of fiscal consolidation. This has been discussed by the economic survey in detail. Then tax buoyancy, a very important thing. I am discussing again and again this thing. The growth in gross tax revenue is around 13.4% in financial year 2024, translating into a tax revenue buoyancy of 1.4%. 1.4 tax buoyancy is huge amount. 1.4 means the growth was led. Tax buoyancy we calculate percentage change in GDP, percentage change in tax revenue upon percentage change in GDP. If tax buoyancy is 1, that means tax revenue growth and change in GDP is same. But 1.4 means tax revenue has grown 40% more as compared to change in GDP. And this is possible because of the various reforms, because of the formalization, that is because of the GST, that is all happening in the economy. So the growth was led by a 15.8% growth in direct taxes. So, and our direct taxes has grown more. Why? Because of the improvement in tax administration, because of the filing of more tax returns, because we have not increased the base level of tax slab, that still starts at 3 lakh. So this fact you should remember. Out of the total tax revenue, 55% coming from direct taxes and 45% from indirect taxes. See, the increased contribution of direct taxes is telling that our progressivity in taxation is increasing. See, indirect taxes are regressive. Direct taxes are progressive, because direct taxes you can create a slab. Now, when our direct taxes are more, 55% of GTR accrued from direct taxes and remaining 45% is indirect, that means our tax system is moving towards more progressive system. Because see, the growth in direct taxes is also more as compared to indirect taxes, so we can say that our tax system is becoming more progressive. Then sovereign rating, a very important thing that you should understand. See, if we want to create jobs, For that, investment is required. Now, how much Indian private sector can do? To a certain extent. If a country of this size with 140 crore population, if we want to provide jobs, until and unless the businessmen from all over the world starts investing, we won't be able to create jobs for this entire youth, which we have around 56 crore of labor force. For that, FDI is must, there is no other solution. Of course, Indian private sector is supporting, but we must require FDI. Now, to attract more FDI, until unless we have better sovereign rating, the government's rating, country's rating, we won't be able to attract. So, our sovereign rating must improve. Whenever a foreign investor tries to invest in a country, let's say an investor from US wants to invest in Malaysia, it checks two things. First, what is the sovereign rating of Malaysia, what is the rating of government, whether it has defaulted in its payment of credit or not, and if it is investing in a particular company, then the credit rating of that particular company. So, credit rating of a specific country and then credit rating of that of a particular company in which the foreign investor is investing. Both are important. Now, if we want to attract more foreign investment, we must improve sovereign rating, and to improve sovereign rating will improve only when or mostly when we are able to reduce our fiscal deficit and debt. Standard & Poor, that rating, International Credit Rating Agency, has improved our rating. S&P Global Ratings upgraded India's sovereign credit rating from stable to positive in May 2024. And it has said that it will further improve the rating if we follow the path of fiscal consolidation. So, now you must appreciate that why there is a lot of focus on fiscal consolidation. Why government is aggressively trying to reduce the fiscal deficit, so that improve the credit rating and bring in more FDI from all over the world. And of course, it helps in bringing down improvement. If we do fiscal consolidation, that helps in bringing down the interest yield in the economy. And once yield comes down, the cost of capital becomes cheaper, which helps a lot in increasing investment, because majority of the investment is going to happen through borrowing mechanism. And so, Standard & Poor has said that if we improve our this macroeconomic stability and other things, they are going to further improve our credit rating. Regarding FDI inflows, as I said that FDI inflows have declined in the last 2-3 years. That is true that it has declined, but there is a shift happening in FDI. What is we are seeing is that we can classify FDI in post just after COVID in 21-22, our FDI was around $84 billion, gross FDI. Gross and net means whatever came from abroad, that is net. But all those companies who have already invested, they are generating profit, and that profit is again invested, that is gross basically. So, gross FDI has reduced, net FDI is also reduced. But we need to see all this in a particular context. FDI can be divided into digital and physical. Physical FDI means a foreign company investing in road, railway, manufacturing. Digital FDI means a foreign investor is going to invest into services. See here, consultancy, telecom, software, this is digital FDI. What trend we are seeing that since last few years, digital FDI is increasing, that means FDI in services, consultancy, software, technology is increasing, and physical FDI is decreasing. And one very important aspect of decrease in physical FDI is also that earlier what used to happen that if a particular company abroad, let's say Apple, if they want to manufacture their phone in India, they used to create a subsidiary and invest. So whatever amount they are investing, that is counted in FDI, so our FDI used to increase. Now what they are doing is, they are not investing in India, they are hiring contract manufacturers. So the manufacturer will be from India, they will hire, they will tell them, they will give the design, they will give everything, and a particular company in India will manufacture and sell them. So now when a particular company is manufacturing, contract manufacturer is manufacturing an item and selling it to them, this will come under current account rather than FDI. Earlier, that same Apple company was creating a subsidiary and producing, so it was counted in FDI. So the form of FDI is changing from physical to digital. The form of FDI is changing from actual FDI to contract manufacturing franchisee model. Right? So if a particular company from abroad creates a subsidiary and then manufactures, it's an investment. If a particular company hires a contract manufacturer, for example, Foxconn is a contract manufacturer. A particular company in India, Dixon Technology, it's the biggest contract manufacturer of mobile phones. So rather than Apple manufacturing here or Samsung manufacturing, creating a subsidiary here, they may hire Dixon Technology. Now if Dixon is manufacturing phone and selling it to them, it will not be counted in FDI, but of course it is going to generate jobs and improve our current account deficit. So this is a major shift that is happening in FDI. That's all elaborated here. Then financial sector, stock market. Now try to understand. Economic survey is suggesting that retail investors, individual investors in the stock market is rising post-COVID. There has been a major jump. If you will see, the registered individual investor base at NSE National Stock Exchange has nearly tripled from March 2022-24 to 9.2. So earlier it was, let's say, 3 crore. Now it is 9, tripled in the last 4 years. So there is an aggressive interest of individual investors, retail investors in the stock market. And this is leading to stock prices or short-term trading, and stock prices or Indian capital market is the market capitalization of all the listed companies has increased a lot. And economic survey is saying that we must put caution on this because the financial market and the real economy. Real economy means the real production of goods and services, road infrastructure. Because of much more enthusiasm of the retail investors in the financial markets, the stock prices are moving. If it is go too much out of this real economy, see what happens that whatever is the actual real economy is happening, only in that proportion the stock prices should increase. So stock prices should increase as per the performance, as per the production, as per the profit of the company. Now if the profit is normal, and if too many people entered into the stock market, and if this stock market prices are being driven just by more and more liquidity from the retail investors, then it may create bubble, and in future all these investors may lose. So government is saying that we must put a restraint, we must have a caution. And in this context, then you will see that budget has increased the long-term tax gain, long-term capital gain tax, and short-term capital gains. So short-term capital gain tax has increased more as compared to long-term capital gains, and to deter them in futures and options, government has increased securities transaction tax also, STT. STT is not on gain or loss, it is on every transaction. So economic surveys is the background, is the context in which that budget has proposed this increase of long-term and short-term capital gain tax. Then external sector or external sector trade deficit. External sector trade deficit has reduced. Our current account deficit has reduced in financial year 2024. Why this has reduced? Because our trade deficit, if you see, we have generated more remittances, and our current account deficit is always, we always have current account deficit, but in just preceding quarter, January to March, our current account was in surplus. So that has helped in bringing the 1 year current account deficit only till 0.7%, because earlier it was used to be 2% of GDP last year, last to last year. But last year it has come down to 0.7% of GDP. You can see this is the overall trade performance. Trade means export and import of goods and services, both. So this is 778. This is your export of goods and services, in which around $435 billion is goods and rest is 300 something is services, and this is our imports. So our trade, try to understand, see, under current account, we have trade of goods, trade of services, plus certain other things. So current account is a much broader concept as compared to trade, right? So current account includes trade of goods and services plus factor income, investment income, remittances, and etc. This represents trade. This represents export, and this is the import of goods and services. This is the import of goods and services, and this is the export of goods and services. So you can see the trend from financial year 15 to financial year 24. It has mostly moved in line. So here, last year, if you will see, the deficit was more in 23. Now it has come down to $75.6 billion. Just a trend, it may help you in exam. This is a very important thing. UPSC asked a question also last year. Share in world, India's calendar wise, India's trade. Here trade means share in world merchandise. So it is only about goods. India's share in world merchandise exports is 1.8. Services export 4.4. We relatively, our export of goods is less as compared to export of services. We are more competitive in services. So our share of services export in world is more, 4.4%. Our share of goods export is only 1.8%. So our share in world exports, goods and services combined, is 2.4. This is our share of export of goods and services in the overall trade. Then this is trade to GDP ratio. So our export is around 22%, import is around 24%. So it is around 47% of GDP. This is export and import of goods and services. So our export is around 22% of GDP. Import of both goods and services combined. So if nothing is written, trade written, you should understand goods and services both. Import around 24%. So this becomes 46%. So this is our trade to GDP ratio. Trade open. So this indicates trade openness. If you will see in 1991, our trade to GDP ratio was 15.5. Now trade to GDP ratio is 46%. You may see that it has come down because in the last 1 year, because of the geopolitical tensions, Middle East, our trade has got impacted. So this has, our trade means overall trade, even export and import both has got impacted. Remittances, this India is the largest recipient of remittances. Last year we received $120 billion. Then it is Mexico, then China. What change we are seeing in remittances is that earlier majority of remittances used to come from Gulf countries. Now, and Gulf countries mostly it was unskilled, semi-skilled labor. Now we are getting more remittances from US and European countries where more skilled Indians have gone. So now the more remittances is coming from skilled Indians from US and Europe as compared to the remittances coming from the Gulf countries. So overall, there is a structural change in remittances. Of course, there is a geographical change also. Earlier it was more from Gulf countries, now it is more from US and Europe. And so it is, since it is from US and Europe, we know that it is more of a skilled one, right? Then job creation. EPFO, Employees Provident Fund organizations, those organizations which have more than 20 laborers, they need to register with EPFO, and once they register, we call it a formal job, a formal company. EPFO registrations have increased. That means there has been a large creation of formal jobs. So if you see, the net payroll additions under EPFO have more than doubled in 5 years. That means the growth is more than 15% around. Every year 15% formal employment is growing. That's a great number, because our nominal growth is if 9% and formal employment is growing. You can see that population growth is 1%, and formal job growth is around 15%. That means there is a shift from informal to formal. Job creation, this budget in job creation, this budget focuses on two major things. One is agro processing and the other is care economy. If we are, now you saw that in the budget that we are trying to improve the female labor force participation. If we improve the female labor force participation, parallelly we will need to develop this care economy. So we need to build hostels for women, we need to build creches for women. So that is also going to help in increasing our GDP, plus women labor force participation will also increase. This both should go hand in hand. So care economy and agro processing are two main job creators for the future on which government is focusing. Agro processing is very labor intensive business. Care economy is also. So both of these government, there is a lot of focus on job creation. Agriculture, our economic survey says that the future growth is not going to come from cereals. The income growth in agriculture, the income growth for the farmers is going to happen in high-yielding crops like animal husbandry, horticulture, fruits, vegetables. So they are suggesting that smallholder and specifically for smallholder farmers, they must shift to animal husbandry, livestock, horticulture, and these things, which will help in increasing their income, because the future income growth is not going to come from cereals or normal agricultural production. This budget also focuses on so this is economics. So economic survey is suggesting that we should focus more on MSMEs, and then budget is launching schemes for MSMEs. So this budget also focuses more on MSMEs. Support systems to develop MSME projects and their bankability and adequate financing. So as I told you that there is a major gap of financing for MSMEs. So this economic survey has suggested certain improvements for MSMEs. This is information based, you can just go through it, nothing much to explain. But I will tell you that MSMEs, the major challenge that MSMEs faces in India are, first, licensing, approvals. Big companies have resources, they can liaison with the government and get the clearances, but it is the MSMEs who faces the major hurdle in getting clearances. So one is licensing approval requirement. The other is inspection. There are a lot of labor inspectors going for inspection and then they create problem in their functioning. Plus rules and regulations. So compliance burden. Now you may say that, sir, there will be more compliance for bigger company. Bigger company has the resources to handle this. But for a smaller company, meeting the compliance of labor laws or other rules, regulations, it is very difficult. So the economic survey is suggesting that we must, for reforming MSMEs, because now we are focusing on bottom-up approach. And bottom-up approach means we are focusing more on MSMEs and of course youth and skilling. So MSMEs, we are saying that we must remove this license, a lot of approvals that is required. We must reduce the compliance burden, and we must reduce this inspection system in MSMEs. Then only they will be able to grow fast. So focus areas, economic survey suggests few focus areas that we must focus, so that, see, our growth has been 7%, which is good. To maintain this growth in the medium term, we must focus on these areas: generating productive employment, skill gap, tapping full potential of agriculture, easing compliance requirements for MSMEs, managing green transition. Chinese conundrum. Chinese conundrum means here we are quite integrated with China. There is a huge import from China. Now, you may remember that post-COVID we banned FDI from China because we thought that at that time the stock prices were low, the Chinese companies can do acquisition, they can acquire companies. So we put a restriction on Chinese companies. Now we want investment from abroad. We want investment from China in various new technologies, electric vehicles and others, manufacturing of mobiles. So we want to bring FDI from China, but there is a concern with the China, that border and other tensions. So that's called the Chinese conundrum. So we are in a dilemma. So whether we should allow that FDI from China. If we allow, what about the border tensions that's going on? Because earlier we banned FDI from China. So this is a concern which the economic survey has raised. Then tackling inequality, you know that in the post-COVID period, the high-end items, high-end cars, high-end products, production consumption has increased, but the two-wheeler and other basic items, the production or consumption didn't increase that much. So there is a gap that is happening at the top level and the bottom. So inequality has increased post-COVID. So we need to tackle that, because if this inequality will increase and the bottom of the pyramid people are left out, then we will never be able to generate the demand in the economy, because if majority of the population is left out, we won't be able to create demand and growth. Improving the quality of health of India's young population. This survey has given a big paragraph on India's young population. It has raised concern regarding obesity and the quality of food that we are consuming, because it is impacting health. So if you get time, you must read that para. Until unless we are healthy, we will never be able to increase the productivity of labor that we talked about in the total factor productivity. So we should improve our health also. So these are the suggestions. Now, where it will be used? If you are writing a mains answer, discuss the challenges and the suggestions that you think to make India to have a sustained growth, higher growth of 7-8%. You can write all these suggestions. Then growth strategy for Viksit Bharat. As I told you that the structural reforms of the last decade focused on supply side of the economy. Now it is saying that we must give way to the bottom-up approach, bottom-up model for further growth and being a developed economy. And that Viksit Bharat target can be achieved by 6 strategies that economic survey has suggested. And those 6-pronged growth strategy for Viksit Bharat. First is strategy for boosting private sector investment. As I am telling you again and again, in the last years, government has spent, so government investment has happened a lot. Now it is the turn that private sector must start investing. But for that to invest, the demand from the bottom of the pyramid must come. So private sector investment, then strategy for the growth and expansion of India's MSMEs. Now you know that we have 11 crore MSMEs. Until and unless they develop, because they are also contributing a lot of investment in the Indian economy. They are creating a lot of jobs. After agriculture, MSME is the largest job creator, 11 crore around. So we must focus on growth and expansion of MSMEs, because our MSMEs are remaining dwarf. They remain at the same size for a long period of time and consume a lot of resources, benefits that is support given by the government. So they must be encouraged to expand their business. Then a strategy for removing the growth impediments in the agriculture sector. Agriculture sector, the impediments are low productivity, supply chain, storage, processing that we have already discussed. A strategy to secure the financing of green transition in India. See, green projects, green transitioning requires a huge capital, and we are short of that, so we must attract green financing from various foreign sovereign wealth funds, private equity. So government is trying to raise more and more private equity. Private equity means investment by investors in an unlisted company. A lot of startups are coming in India for green transitioning, which are not registered on capital market, not listed. So they must be able to get private equity. So there is a lot of focus on private equity and sovereign wealth funds, so that they should support the green transitioning of India. Then a strategy towards bridging the education and employment gap. Now this is being suggested by economic survey, and that's why the budget has launched various schemes of skilling and entrepreneurship, skilling and internship in the budget that we discussed just. A strategy towards building state capacity and capability. So state capacity and capability. Here what government is doing, government is reforming its processes, improving governance. Government is giving training to bureaucrats to increase the capability. Government has increased its capacity, and that's why government has been able to deliver various welfare services, either Awas Yojana or tap water or this toilets, or various DBT benefits. This government has been able to do because government has increased its capacity plus capability. To increase capability, government is giving a lot of training to its bureaucrats and to its government officers. Because see, in a liberalized economy, government plays a limited role. Government plays a limited role, but government will have to improve its capacity and capability to handle the larger part of the private sector. And there is a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid, they require government support, saturation of government services, which will be provided by the government sector. So we must improve the capability and the capacity of the government sector. Capacity, see, capability means we should be more educated, more trained to handle, to provide the services, and capacity means we should be able to handle more and more things. For example, earlier we were not able to transfer DBT through online payment. Now we are giving subsidies through DBT. So we have increased our capacity to deliver more and more services to the poor masses, to the last mile also. Capability means we should be able to do work more efficiently and in a better way. So this is the 6-pronged strategy to make India a Viksit Bharat by 2047. See, a lot of other things have been discussed in economic survey. You can go on reading and reading. But what you need to do is focus on your syllabus. And in your syllabus, in your chapters, you just need to look at what additional is there in the economic survey. Just look at it. Reading the entire economic survey is not going to help you. So see the syllabus and then check that what additional things or additional data is given in the economic survey. I will share this PPT and keep on posting or sharing more content in future if I find more in this economic survey or budget. So this will be uploaded in the link. So that's all from my side. And see, there is a lot of information in budget and economic survey. Each and everything cannot be taught here in one session. And for that, we have already this course and syllabus. So in the course, I teach all these things in very much detail. This is just that budget has come, so you must know that what needs to be understood in a broader perspective. So we have shared just that one. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much.